All right, welcome back, and thank you, Andy, for joining us again. This week, Andy's actually going to cover a topic for us, and he's chosen a nice title, obviously a background in marketing here, the threat. So, Andy, why don't you introduce what this topic's going to be about this week?
Yeah, look, I've been, over the years, been looking really hard at this sort of issue that's going on around us, around mental health in particular, both at home and in the workplace. And it's something that I think all of us that have been founders of businesses and been entrepreneurs have suffered with and from in different ways. And one of the common sayings that we talk about when we're sort of coaching and mentoring founders is it seems to me their greatest fear is always being found out, what they've done behind the scenes, being found out they're not good enough, being found out it's all wrong, being found out you're not right. But I think more broadly, when I looked really hard and you heard us on an earlier podcast talking about Adler and people like that, what causes anxiety? What causes people to become really defensive? What causes people to slip back and step away? And I sort of have concluded over the years that it really comes around this idea of the threat, right? They perceive things as a threat. So they immediately start operating what I call below the line, because if you're below the line, you're defensive, you're reserved, you're not going to speak out, you're not going to challenge, you're not going to participate, because you're threatened. You're threatened by the people, you're threatened by being found out, you're threatened by the opportunity, you're threatened by everything. If you're above the line, everything's an opportunity. Your actual starting point is actually everybody has my best interests at heart. If you're below the line, nobody has your best interests at heart. Everybody is out to do some kind of damage to you, some kind of harm to you. If you're below the line, everything's happening to you. This is happening to me because Facebook sucks and people are evil, or the government's bad, or everything's happening to me. If you're above the line and you're beyond the threat, everything's just happening. It's just happening because it's happening. And within the happening is opportunity. And that gives me the ability to apply creativity, to be open to ideas, to be open to input. And I think a lot of this idea of the threat also for me stems from this idea that we're in such a success-orientated culture. No one picks up or reads in a blog post a story of an average person. Tony gets up, he walks his dog, he has Weet-Bix for breakfast, he goes to work, he does a pretty good job, he comes home, walks his dog, has pasta bake with his partner, watches MasterChef and goes to bed. Said no one ever, right? No one can say that. Everyone has to say.
Especially about me.
I get up at 4:30 a.m. and I do yoga, followed by 40 minutes of meditation, and then I write in my journal, and then I listen to my podcast as I power walk to work, and then I have 30-minute meetings with 10-minute. It's like, oh my God, could everyone just chill the fuck out? Like, it's okay just to be you. It's okay just to be
and
you.
They're average at points in their life, right? They're not always that social perfection.
You can't always be on. And I think when I looked at it and I look at many of the challenges I faced over the years, a lot of it came down to I could have been so much more successful and done so much better if I actually thought my starting point, if I was above the line and I didn't actually need to be successful. I just needed to be me. And the other person actually had my best interests at heart. They weren't out to get me after all. And there was no threat, actually. It was all just opportunity. And I should have just got on with being alive, right? And applying attention to what was in front of me, as opposed to worrying endlessly about this may not happen. And if this doesn't happen, then that won't happen. If that doesn't happen, then that won't happen. And then the world will end.
Andy, isn't a big, huge part of this attached to you, to want a better word, your ego? Your ego is trying to defend you and your worldview of yourself. So often, without being kind of particularly self-aware, the ego takes over and it's trying to defend you.
You can suffer from this without much of an ego. Like I would say
I think
a lot.
that would be my point. Is I think certainly for me, it's all about ego. Absolutely, because I'm used to getting on stage and speaking in front of, I don't know, what was it last week, 2,000 people, and you come off the stage, you've got a bit of a rock star ego going, and What you've got to be really mindful of, though, I think, is that the threat gets worse the more energy you give to others. And so I go back to what I said earlier, like you give your energy away every day, right? And so if you're perceiving the other person as a threat, you give disproportionate amounts of your energy away to the threat than you do to the people who love you, who aren't a threat. So you come home all wound up about some asshole at work you were dealing with and what a wanker they were and how you can't stand it and they're out to get you, and you talk about that for 30 minutes. And what you could have actually talked about is something far more beautiful and interesting with your partner, and instead all you've done is unload. And I think that does stem in part from the ego. But for me, Ronan, and like you, I've read so much on this. I think the ego is too vastly overstated as a concept, as opposed to just simply stating we're just humans, and so we behave in actually quite predictable ways as humans. It's our fight or flight characteristic that's ingrained in our natural things. And given we don't have animals chasing around trying to kill us anymore, and we don't have armed warriors on the streets trying to shoot us, we go hunting for the threat in new ways. And so the new spear carrying enemy from the tribe is actually the people in product who are out to get you, and so I'm going to be out to get them, and boy, am I going to get them. And I think that threat causes people within families and people within business to operate and function in really bad ways, right? Because we're incredibly defensive or offensive. We're not just ourselves. And so I'm really big on this idea that I've learned around how do you give feedback, particularly to kids, but also to people you're working with, where there is no consequence. I'm just giving you feedback. There is no consequence. If you don't improve, I'm afraid you might not get your bonus. Or if we don't see a big improvement, you may no longer have a job. It's much more, here's some feedback, do with it what you will. As you know, in life, there are always consequences. I don't know what the consequence might be, because I don't know if you're going to fix this 1% or 100%. Consequence could be really positive.
So we had a Finbar who was a corporate underground a couple of months ago said something to me that I found really succinct. He basically said, why are you reacting to that person? Like if that person had said it was your mother, would you react the same way? If it was your grandmother, would you react the same way? If it was a best friend, because he's saying this, you're reacting to it because of who it is to you, the connection you have. So stop the reaction and work out the power that you have to actually work out why you're reacting to that. Not what he's saying, but why you're reacting to that. Now, I've been doing that for about 3 months, and it's changed 100%. My way. Right.
Well, I think you also have to be. I think you also have to be super disciplined about weeding out the energy vampires in your life. Right. You actually need to. I keep a running list of them. Right. Of people who I just.
Oh, can you sell that list?
Yeah. My advanced warning list.
But you're writing it on a notepad, and you got a gun. You just wait until the time that ticks down the note.
No, I mean, it's a technique I learned from a really good mate of mine, Dandapani, who's sort of he was a Hindu monk, now a Hindu priest, which means he's no longer in a monastery. And I said, how do you deal with the energy vampires? And he just said, you just practice compassionate disinterest. It's like, oh, yes. They'll sit down with you and say, oh, it's really tough and blah, 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 and this is not going well. And you're like, oh my God, I could spend an hour talking to this person about how miserable they are. And you're just like, well, that sounds terrible. How's the weather been? I mean, I'm just like, you've got to be very, very conscious about where your energy is going, because if everything's a threat, all your energy is going to go to the very people who deserve the least of it. Right. And that for me is a huge thing to teach people, is just, where your attention goes, your energy goes. Make sure your energy isn't going to the energy vampires, because they will use all your energy up.
But there's a part of us as humans, though, that are drawn to that. I mean, you look at reality TV, there's been a big upswing in that, not only because it's cheap to make, but because we like drama in our lives. And we don't want it necessarily in our lives. We're happy to see it in somebody else's life. So there's a big draw to that. To be, if you look at the news, it still gets great reviews. People want to be able to watch it. And what it is the rarity. You mentioned something before about Tony eating his pasta bake and walking around and not doing, just having a quiet life, which is what he does, compared to, say, Ronan, who runs around naked and jumps off buildings flying.
Well, what you're getting at, though, is a really interesting thing, right? Which is the threat also stems from our desire now to amplify the threats around us. Oh my God, this is going on. You sit down, a typical business conversation goes something like this, how you doing, Matt? Oh, I'm doing good. How you doing, Andy? Great. Oh God, the situation with tourists fucked up. And did you read about what's going on in Taiwan? The Chinese could invade at any minute. And fuck, did you read about, what do you think of what's going on? Whereas I've increasingly learned that I just don't have those conversations anymore. It's like,
I stopped watching.
Where did we lose the art of conversation?
Yeah, I stopped watching the news, Andy, about 5-6 years ago for the exact same things. People say, "Oh, so-and-so's happening in China." I said, "Is it? I didn't know," and that shuts down the conversation. But also, then you hear things like, "Oh, it's a nightmare. It's terrible. It's a disaster. It's catastrophe." All the sort of some of those marketing buzzwords, or certainly on websites, they put this very hyper thing about something which is reasonably quite normal. Interest rates slashed. Now they've gone down 0.25%, which is the normal thing. So you're being hyped up by either energy vampires or people that deliberately want to create that heightened anxiety because it serves some kind of
it grabs attention, and that's what people are looking at because there's that much information out there. It's how you grab that attention. It's
right. So what you've done there, Matt and Ronan, is stitched together the principle of the threat, and that is attention. Where your attention goes, your energy flows. So what's really interesting to me is the people that I am drawn back most to now are the people who I sit down and I go, how's it going? Oh, great. And by the way, I've been reading this amazing book written by this woman who wrote about the Greek gods, and it's a novel, and you should totally read it. And it's just absolutely fascinating to me. And have you read anything? Oh, no, I really read biographies or something. Oh, what are you reading at the moment? Oh, I'm reading blah, 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 blah. So and you're like, wow, I want to have a coffee with that person again. They're the most interesting person in my world. And it's like Ronan and I can probably sit down and talk a lot about, the Adler books on the courage to be disliked and the courage to be liked and all those other books he's written. And I'd much rather be having that conversation than hang out with an energy vampire, because the trick is to perceive the threats, to where the threat to you're amplifying the threat or other people are amplifying threats. Because imagine if you sit there and you go, there actually are no threats. Yeah, COVID's a problem. I'll go have a vaccine or I'll stay at home till it's gone away. Yeah, whatever, move on. You
also see those relationships like that where every conversation back and forth is something that incredibly dramatic, and you're going like, you want to say just chill, but they're feeding off that negative energy. I can't believe you do this.
It's exhaustive, and they're always waiting for the other shoe to fall. And for the sad bit is that you will fulfill your own prophecy if that's how you live your life. That's just a fact. You will fulfill a prophecy of something going wrong if you're always expecting it to go wrong.
Well, we as humans were never meant to be metricized, and that's what's happened to us. See, Ronan, I can see you're wearing an Aura ring, I think.
I am, yes. Yeah, well spotted.
Yeah, it's my little example there. I've got one too on my finger too, and it's interesting, right? So suddenly I've got data on how I slept last night. So I slept well last night. Got up, I immediately look at my sleep score. If my sleep score is negative or low because I've typically drunk a lot of whiskey, then I'm like, oh my God, I'm going to have a terrible day. It's going to be a terrible day. I'm exhausted. I'm like, what the fuck? Where did that ever come from? Where did I need a ring on my finger and an app to tell me I'm going to have a shit day? What if I removed that threat? What if I actually said, that's not a problem, whatever? All that's told me actually is try not to drink so much whiskey. Got that on board. I'm actually going to have an awesome, if not slightly under the weather day, but it's going to be awesome. So I just think there's this notion, I talk a lot about the threat of how do you identify the things that are causing you unnecessary pain or not sufficient gain, understand the nature of the threat, and simply disassociate yourself with it. Actually operate above the line. Go above the line and go, it is just the way it is. I'm tired today, whatever. So, and with that cue, I know I can actually have an awesome day. I might have to behave a little differently. I might have to be a little more mindful of my state, but I actually don't need the data to tell me that.
I do love your bit about other people having your best interests at heart, because we recently read Humankind, and there's this
it's a great book.
There's this whole idea of people are a sheeple. If you get people into a room, you say this is how you should behave, most people will just follow. This is the social norm. So politicians go, well, this is just normal, we're supposed to act like this. So they act like children, or they act polarizing deliberately. Whereas you set the right conditions, the right environment, and you kind of own even your own space, you're able to have that kind of thing. You've been to one of our groups, Andy, where we're saying this is an abundant group. This is the expectation. This is the norm to look out for each other. Okay, great. This is nice. Great. This is how we play in the sandpit together. So you can absolutely set that environment around you of this is how I want. No energy vampires, want abundance thinkers, want to make sure that we're all looking out for each other, whatever that is. That's just a great way to live your life.
I think it is. And I think it's so important if we're going to remove the threat from our kids' life, because our kids are under absurd pressure to perform and to be something they're not necessarily ready to be. And I think it worries me a lot when I see that pressure, because suddenly everything's a threat to them. You sit with a 15 or a 16-year-old and she or he can't become a surgeon because my math score is too low. Oh my God, my whole life is ruined. And it's like, well, so be an artist. Like, you don't have to do that. Well, why do you want to be a surgeon? Oh, I want to do this and I want to do that and I want to do this. But none of those things may happen. Why are you worried about those things? And so I just,
No, I mean, the thing is, though, we learned how to be parents from our parents. There's no other teacher. We learn how to be brothers and sisters by having our brothers and sisters. The thing is, we've got to be able to bring that back. I mean, like, if we're always busy and saying, like, the default to anybody is, oh, how you doing? Oh, I'm really busy. Nobody says I'm productive or I'm actually had a great night's sleep. I'm just chilled out anymore. They have to be something. Your point last week, Andy, was about, having a good night's sleep is good enough, where, what's the energy? Now, if we're not doing that ourselves, our kids are watching that. Our kids are seeing what we're doing and then emulating that, and that pressure continues. So if it's going to stop, it's got to stop with us.
I think you're raising another one of my little passion points. I grew up largely without a dad in my life. Either, I was off at boarding school. My dad vanished when I was young. I had a great stepdad, but didn't see much of him because I was at boarding school and stuff. And so I'm really challenged around what does a good dad actually look like. I have no idea. I have zero role model on what a dad should do. And so I see what other dads do, and I try to model that a little bit, and normally don't do very well at it because I haven't seen it happen enough to get it right. But I think there's this, particularly between fathers and sons, and fathers and daughters too, but particularly with fathers and sons around, many of us now have grown up without a dad around. Many of us. Definitely. We have absolutely no idea what to do. We have no reference model. And you can't just read a book. You can't. No. You can't. I mean, what do you do? And
Andy, on that point, that was one of the reasons why I set up OMSB originally, was because I didn't have what I would call I was raised by wolves, and having people that I could actually follow through, and having other men to be able to support me, because everybody does. But to answer your question that was thrown up about how do you know you've been a good dad, it's how you feel. If I feel that I've spent enough time with my son and I feel good because of it, then that's enough. I'm not raging it based on what Tony has to say or what Ronan has to say or what Andy has to say. I feel good about this. But look, guys, let's wrap up. Let's wrap. Yeah. Tony, what was the one point that you came away with, or what would you like to take away from this?
I think as someone that has suffered a lot with anxiety in my past, just the point that you made about, I guess, who you spend your time with, like avoiding those vampires, and maybe go for even try and be one yourself, as an extreme. Like, try and find some nice people to be around. That's very important.
Ronan, what did you take away today?
It's like Andy and I read the same books and have a very similar philosophy. So I'm looking to find out more about Andy and more share of books, I think. So, but yeah, I thought the talk today was awesome.
Look, what I took away from today. Oh, sorry. What I took away today was basically that talk to the people in the room that are the quiet ones. You know, actually go up. In a group, there's always going to be the loud ones like myself. I've always found the quietest people actually the most intelligent. So that means that Andy and I usually aren't the most intelligent, and probably Ronan's more. So, but to get that out of them and actually go and ask them if they haven't spoken. Andy, this was an awesome topic this week. Is there anything you want to finalize with?
No, just be wary of energy vampires. Understand that your energy goes where your attention flows, and try to spend as much time operating above the line without the threat, and just viewing everything as it is meant to be, and changing it where it's not, but operate above the line, not below the line, as much as you can.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Sorry.
All right. Thanks, guys. Have a good one. See you later.
Thanks, Andy. Bye.
Thanks, Andy.
Bye.